Hello, fellow book lovers, both readers and writers. I am Maddie Dalrymple. I'm the author of the Ann Kinnear suspense novels and suspense shorts and the Lizzie Ballard thrillers. And I also write, speak, podcast, and consult on the writing craft and the publishing voyage as the Indy Author. And you can find out more about me at maddiedalrymple.com and at theindyauthor.com. And this is my video series, What I Learned, where I ask authors 2 questions related to their latest book. What did they learn from that book that they'd like to share with their fellow authors? And what did they learn from that book that they'd like to share with their fellow readers? And I am here today with Greta Boris. Hey, Greta, how are you doing?
Hi, Maddie. Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Yeah, it is my pleasure. To give our viewers a little bit of background on you, USA Today bestselling mystery thriller author Greta Boris hailed from sunny Southern California, where based on her books, which are all set there, things are darker than you'd expect. Her stories have been called atmospheric and unputdownable. She is also the co-founder of the Author Wheel, creators of books, courses, and a podcast dedicated to helping writers overcome their roadblocks and keep their stories rolling. And Greta was actually a guest on the Indy Author Podcast in episode 184. She and her partner in crime, Megan Haskell, joined me to talk about planning a novel. And so Greta's here to talk about her latest book, A Permanent Solution. And so I'm asking Greta the 2 What I Learned questions, the first of which is, what did you learn from A Permanent Solution that you'd like to share with your fellow authors?
So my first series is a series of standalone books. So each book kind of had its own protagonist. So then when I started this new series, which A Permanent Solution is part of the Mortician Murders, I decided to have a single protagonist that took, was solving the crimes in every book. But that was a little overwhelming because I was trying, it's almost like when you're writing a series with a single protagonist, you're writing 2 stories. You're writing the mystery that is begun and ended in that novel, but then you're also continuing on the cast of characters and the things that happen in the background and the things that she's learning and developing as she goes and grows as a human being. And I knew that the theme of these books overall are belonging. And I decided what I would do to make my life a little bit easier. And I think it's working. So I'm sharing this with you author buddies out there. I decided to write it in a series of trilogies. And I figured 3 books was like, I could kind of conceptualize what she might learn about her weird ability. She has this ability that she gets the final sensations of the deceased when she touches their hair. So she begins life as a hairstylist and then becomes a mortician. So what she learns about that ability, she's also a real loner and has no great sense of purpose or tribe in the first book. So in the first 3 books, they kind of geared that, like she was going to learn about her purpose, find her tribe, and learn a little bit more about this gift, or as she calls it, a curse that she's got. But then A Permanent Solution was the first book in the second trilogy. And so I started thinking about, well, what would be a good thing for her to learn in the second 3 books? So I would say what I learned in writing that book is just that even series, just like a novel, have an arc. And if I plan them in kind of 3s, that's sort of like a act 1, act 2, act 3, it helped my brain. And so in the second 3 books, Permanent Solution being the first one, she starts to learn about where does this ability come from. She's learning about family. And so it's still under the banner of belonging, but she's learning about her family connections. Her long lost cousin shows up and she has a weird ability too. She's a veterinarian, and she gets dreams when she touches the fur of a dog who sniffed a dead body. So,
Wow.
I know. So she's learning things about this long lost family and her cousin, and just moving that she's a little romance that's developing and moving that whole cast of characters forward a little bit. So I think that would be the helpful thing that I learned is just go ahead and break things into 2 pieces. And for me, 3 is just a sort of a natural piece, a natural set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know that, I mean, I'm sure this is true of many, many people, but I interviewed the author Edwin Hill on the podcast, and he was talking about how if he was going to pitch a book to his publisher, he would always pitch books in sets of 3 for both, I think, business reasons, but also creative reasons for exactly the reason that you're saying. When you wrote the first book of the first trilogy, did you know it was the first book of the first trilogy?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, you
Well,
went into it
I
knowing
did.
that distinct.
I did, and also the thing I liked about the concept of writing trilogies from a business point of view is I think it takes a few books into a series to have any idea if this series is going to hit and be, something people are really going to want to read. But if you like the 7 deadly sins, if you have committed yourself to 7 books and then you get 3-4 books in and you decide, man, I don't know if this series is really hit, you still are committed to writing 7
Yeah.
books, So
And it's
this
not
way, I think,
divisible by 3 either.
no, I know. So I know I think I have some ideas of things to do with those books to relaunch, but they're with a publisher. So
If you're really ambitious, you could do the months of the year, and then you could have, like, 4 sets of trilogies, and you'd really have
oh
to be pretty confident going into that that was gonna pan out.
yeah, you aren't kidding. The season books you could do.
The season books, yeah, that would be easier.
Yeah. And then you could because then you could write like fall. And if
Yeah,
those 3 books, like, September, October, November, or whatever, if those 3 books didn't do great, it's like, well, it was fall. I got fall done.
yeah,
And
and
just
that's actually a great idea. I like
hey,
that. I have a
maybe
friend,
we
Sherry
should do it
Knowlton, who
together.
wrote Dead of you can't remember the order anymore, but it was Dead of Winter, Dead of Summer, Dead of Fall, and whatever one I missed. And so, of course, she got her 4th one out, and everyone was like, "Okay, Sherry, what now?" Because she'd run out of seasons. But you had said that that was the positive thing you learned. Was there a negative thing you learned that you'd like to share with your fellow authors?
Well, I don't know if this is a positive or a negative. I started as a negative and I flipped it. How's that? So I didn't really always think in the very first book or 2 about taking a character through the whole my main characters, yeah, but like side characters, like, am I gonna take this side character through all of my in my mind, I'm kind of planning 9 books, 3 sets of 3. It just, I don't know, it makes
Very
my
meta.
aim yeah, it just makes me happy. But then, she had a boss at the becomes her boss at the mortuary after the end of book 2, and she just wasn't very interesting you know? And that was a little bit of a chew my pencil because it was like, oh, this should be a really fun, interesting setting because she's going to be at the mortuary in every book, for a lot of scenes. So, but I wrote her out in book 2. She ends up getting married and running off to San Francisco. And she has a new boss who's just an absolute nut and he's hysterically funny. And in my mind, anyway, I laugh at him. And he's always messing up words because English isn't his first language. He's from some like Transylvania type country or something. And yeah, he's always saying the wrong word for things. And I get a lot of positive feedback from my readers on that. They love how ridiculously silly he is.
Well,
So that
it is informative to know that even if you have in mind that arc that you want over the trilogy to begin with, I mean, s the arc itself could probably change as well, but certainly the details of what happens in there, you can adjust if you're not feeling it or your readers aren't feeling it.
yeah, yeah. So and I think so that would be another little tip if it's going to be a character that's going to reappear in every book, it's nice to kind of think about the cast as a whole and what because Imogene, my main character, she's sort of a dry wit, sardonic humor kind of a person. So she's not like super funny. So it was perfect to have her against this kind of comedic boss who's a little more slapstick. And the 2 characters play against each other really nicely. So that was something I could have thought about a little more fully than I did, but it worked out okay. So
Yeah, it's always happy to hear the stories that work out that way.
yeah, yeah.
So let's think about what you learned from a permanent solution that you'd like to share with your fellow readers.
So this was a good question. I tend to think about sharing all this kind of stuff with writers because of our podcast and so on. But I'm a big reader and I love to read. I realize that I'm very attracted to books by their settings often. And so because this series is cozy adjacent, it's kind of got that little bit of it's all set in Southern California where I live, and in the area where southern Saddleback Valley, so very kind of a smallish area. But, and then of course the fact that the mortuary setting she's always back and forth at kind of gives it a little bit of a small town feel. But I also like the diversity of having places. I was listening to an interview with Ruth Ware, and I love Ruth Ware's books. And somebody asked her, so how do you, because she writes all standalones, how do you come up with all your books? She goes, oh, I just write books that take place in places I want to go. So, the woman in Cabin 10, I think it was Cabin 10.
I think it's Cabin 10. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she goes, I wanted to go on a cruise ship. And the dark wood, she goes, I wanted to go on a vacation to a house. And, so trying to think about that, like when you do have a cozy-ish book, there's some rules around it. You want to kind of have it in this smallish feeling town area or something, but you can still make cool settings. And so in a permanent solution, I wanted to have at least one good, cool, creepy setting, So I did have a character who, well, she's dead when the book starts, but she becomes a kind of presence. My ghosts don't talk, but they're very there. She becomes a very strong presence. So my main character goes to her house, and it's in Laguna Beach, California, which is near me. And there is a house on Cliff Drive that was near where I used to live. We used to call the witch's house. And it was a very strange looking cottage and had a way overgrown front yard, everything. And it just was creepy looking. So I built that in and made it even creepier. So if readers enjoy a good setting, somewhere you want to escape to, that is, I did manage to put that into a permanent solution. They also go hiking in Black Star Canyon, which is supposed to be the most haunted hiking trail in California. And I know. And I set one of my other books, one of the 7 Deadly Sins, a lot of it was set there. And I had created a fictitious house way up in Black Star Canyon that this man who was a hoarder had. And there was a big crime that took place. And I thought, well, why not just have my new mortician characters end up there? In this now abandoned house, and they talk about how there was a big crime there. And so that was kind of fun too. I like building a world, and so creating a setting that has a lot of moving pieces, and even if it is a smaller area, is a lot of fun. And returning to those places with different characters and different books even can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So those are nice little Easter eggs, I think, for readers who are faithful fans, and they can say, oh, we've been to this house before. We've experienced this part of this world you're building.
I have a wine. I made it up. It's called Red Ravish, and it's in my whole 7 Deadlies series. Somebody is drinking Red Ravish in every book.
Oh, that's fun.
I know. And so then not a permanent solution, but the latest book that will be coming out soon, which is called Buzz Cut. They go to a restaurant in Laguna Canyon Road, and in my Mortician series, and are introduced to Red Ravish, the wine. So I was like, might as well throw it. And Imogene uses Ravishing Red lipstick on her corpses. So those are all kind of fun, like throwing in the Easter eggs. I get a kick out of that. My readers do tend to as well.
That's so cool. Well, we've gotten a little glimpse into the world that you're creating for A Permanent Solution and all your books in the series. So, Greta, please tell our viewers where they can go to find out more about you and everything you do online.
Well, the best place is to go to my website, which is gretaboris.com. And Greta is spelled with 1 T, and Boris is just like Karloff. And so gretaboris.com, and you can get I always have a novella or short stories or something available there right now. It's the novella between books 1 and 2 in the Mortician series, which is where she goes to mortuary school. So you can read that. And then for the writers out there, the authorwheel.com is where Megan and I couch all of our books and courses and things. And our podcast is also the Author Wheel. So,
And I can highly recommend it. It's a fine podcast.
And Maddie was on it. So you can go listen to the Maddie episode, which was,
start with the Maddie episode.
Yeah, I know, which was one of our best anyway. So go to the Maddie episode. It was awesome.
Yeah, you're so sweet. Well, Greta, thank you so much for coming on to When I Learned. This has been super fun.
Yes, thank you so much, Maddie.